Nick, 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 nick. Well, if you're hearing noises like that, we could be covering none other than the Three Stooges, released by Cinemaware, 1987 for the Commodore Amiga, and later ported to many other systems and consoles. Here we have the original Amiga version, in what could be the very first example of a computer game trolling its players. It starts up with the Defender of the Crown title screen, and even has the Defender of the Crown music. It's not the exact same, the samples are different, but the actual tune is the same. And then finally, we get the classic black and white original Three Stooges title with the most well-known lineup of Mo Howard, Larry Fine, and Curly Howard. No Shemp in this one. All in favor of a new Three Stooges game with Shemp in it? Say aye. I like them all, though, even after Curly died, and then Shemp died, and Joe Besser, and then Curly, Joe Dorita. For some reason, I kind of like them all. I'd like to start this one off by pointing to a couple friends of the channel here. Firstly, Stygian Phoenix, who requested this game many, many moons ago, and I'm finally getting around to it. Thank you, Stygian. Definitely check out Stygian, who's on Twitch and YouTube. You can also find her on DeviantArt as well. She's a great artist. She made my avatar there with me about to smash an Amiga 2000. And this review would not have been as rich a review without the help of Intric8, designer of Amigalove.com, who isn't an artist himself, by the way. Anyway, I searched high and low for some shots of this game's manual, which I have heard is a rich manual with many pages, and a lot of it devoted to the history of the Stooges, and nobody had any shots of it online. Usually it's not a big deal finding people scanning those manuals, but I couldn't find this one. Intric8 graciously took a few shots of his manual for me to use in this video, and I tend to think things like that put these videos above and beyond everybody else's, so thank you to Intric8 from Amigalove.com. Go check out that form. So the funny thing is, like many times prior, I came to this game believing it would be a nice and simple game for me to cover, be fast, and I could just go through it, have a little bit of fun with it, and, I move on to something a little more in-depth. Well, I got to this game, again, like many others, and I felt there was going to be a little more to it. There's several different endings to this game, the best of which is a very hard thing to accomplish, and I wanted to accomplish that in my review. And the second thing is, I wanted to look into what inspired the scenes from the game, the actual films that they took from in order to create the game, and so I watched those specific films, and then I watched some more, and then I watched some more. Like, I literally had a lot of this recorded like 2 weeks ago, and if I wanted to, I could have done it just live. I could have just hit record, and I could have just spoke while I played it, and I would have failed because the first few times I played it, I was absolutely horrid, and I couldn't get very far at all. And I kept dying, I kept hitting the mouse traps. And it's not like that wouldn't have made a good video. I could have done that, and it would have been humorous. It would have been rather funny. But at the same time, it wouldn't have given the game any justice, really, because there is those several different endings, and it's based off a show. And I think a lot of people would come to this and think, why the Three Stooges? Why the Three Stooges? I mean, that's, Three Stooges started in the early 1930s, and the latest would have been the late 1960s. This is some cheap cash-in tie-in if I ever saw one, right? No, it's not. This is actually a labor of love, and, well, the Three Stooges became even more popular in the 1950s, 1960s. That's why they lasted so long, is because they started re-airing their short films on television. But he saw them, and even when I was a kid, like, this stuff has been continuously on television since the 1950s. You know, this was a popular franchise in the 1980s, and again, it would have been more focused towards the adults. And now kids were the ones that always fell in love with the Three Stooges first, and I believe originally even the short films were designed for the children in mind, you know, to come to the theater on Saturdays and, you know, spend a few bucks, go to the theater, watch the Three Stooges film, nice and, 18 minutes long, and, you know, that was the entertainment for the children, and this is what they love. They love the slapstick of the Three Stooges. But when I was watching these films again, I haven't really watched a Three Stooges short since I was a kid. I'm watching it again, and this is not just slapstick humor, guys. This is intelligent slapstick humor, which might sound like an oxymoron, but trust me, this stuff is golden. This stuff is not just... I don't particularly care for slapstick humor these days. I don't think it's that funny. Anytime these guys hit each other, it's... the context of it is funny, or if it's not some part of a larger joke, then the absolute randomness of the slapstick is funny, because you never see it coming like that. Well, they're looked at as the masters of slapstick, and when I was watching these films again, I'm telling you, these guys, they're the first, and it's not tired yet. It's all good, and they made close to 1,000 short films in their career, not counting television, their cartoons and movies and stuff. Like, this is short films, almost 1,000 of them. Yeah, I'm not going to say it's the deepest plots ever for something that's only 18 minutes long, but I'm telling you, there are some extraordinarily intelligent things in these films. Like, they satired, Nazi Germany several times, before we were at war even, and during the war. And this is stuff that Hollywood was very much not keen to do at the time. This was before The Great Dictator by Charlie Chaplin. Hollywood is a big influence, and, they helped get America into the spirit of wanting to go to war. Remember, people don't think that. People just think they're anti-war. No, they're anti-stupid wars. A lot of their stuff is on point. It is more than silly slapstick humor, and the slapstick humor that is there. As someone who doesn't really like slapstick, I find this stuff funny. There is intellect that goes behind all of these short films, like the people behind them, it's great. Like, it all looks good. The film is top-notch quality. These guys had the largest contract in the history of Hollywood at the time. Lasted for years. I came here to watch 4 or 5 short films that were, the basis of this game, and I sat down and I must have watched over 20 of them, and I loved every single moment. These are fantastic. I came here to play a game. I got sucked into the game, and I watched some fantastic films. That's a sign of love right there. Let's take a look at this boxing themed platformer screen here that you're going to hear me in the background. This is my least favorite scene because I never quite get it right. I would end up mastering most of these events here, and I do good enough at this one. I make enough money when I do this one, but I always end up hurt myself. The boxing event. Mo enters Curly in a boxing match, knowing that Curly goes berserk at the sound of pop goes the weasel. But guess what? Larry just sat on the violin and busted it. Go on, mattress head, urges Mo, punctuating his request with a few pokes and slaps. Go get a violin and be quick about it. Larry might not be able to find a violin, but he better find something that plays Pop Goes the Wheel so he can transform Curly from a punching bag into a fighting fool. This game is inspired by the Columbia short Punch Drunks. And the scene is fairly accurate to the actual film. These are using actual stills from the film. The film actually goes on longer because the radio ends up, it stops playing Pop Goes the Wheel, so then he has to go back out, and he ends up crashing a truck into the stadium. It's a little more involved in the actual film, but they definitely capture the spirit of the film there. Just so we can cement that this is not a cheap tie-in, let's look at the next page. Editor's note: during the development of this project, we were fortunate enough to be visited by the gracious Joan Howard Marr, Mo's daughter. Several days after her visit, we received the following letter. Mr. Bob Jacob, Master Designer Software Incorporated, 5743 Corsa Avenue, Suite 214, Westlake Village, California. American Amiga game 91361, played in NTSC mode. Dear Bob, as I sat in your offices the other day viewing CinemaWare's new Three Stooges computer game, I realized what a thrill this would have been for my father, Mo. Not only were the screens filled with crisp, sharp details of computerized chaos, but the color was something to behold. During the game, I actually found myself laughing out loud as I watched Curly knocking in frustration as he tried to spoon up the crackers in the bowl of oyster stew, only to have a vicious oyster surface and snatch it away in a pie fight game. I was able to actually join in during the Three Stooges pie fight and zap my father for the first time. All in all, it was a fascinating experience, and I want to thank you and your staff, very creative people, for a job well done. Sincerely yours, Joan Howard. Well, that was the last page of the manual. Let's go back to the first page. Introduction. Stooge, an actor stationed in the audience to assist a comedian by heckling him. An actor who assists a comedian by feeding him lines, being the victim of pranks, etc. Film critic and historian Leonard Maltin once observed the public is made up of two groups, one composed of persons who laugh at the Three Stooges and the other made up of those who wonder why. The appeal of the Stooges defies academic explanation or pedantic analysis. It simply is. Like fingers to the eyes or a fist delivered, pendulum style. Under the chin, the Stooges are a primal force, a kinetic, chaotic belly laugh that either strikes you funny or simply strikes you. Why are the Stooges funny? As Louis Armstrong once remarked, albeit on a different subject, if you have to ask, you'll never know. Let's put it this way. When someone slips in a puddle, are you one of the passerbys laughing uncontrollably, or one of those clucking in disapproval and amazement that anyone can find humor in another's pain? The first group are Stooges fans. The latter are the folks the Stooges spent half a century throwing pies at, literally and figuratively. I must confess that I was not a born Stooge fan when they first appeared on New York TV in 1958. My prematurely sophisticated 8-year-old mind refused to see the humor in those three geeks slapping, punching, and poking one another. I, after all, preferred the more adult humor of Abbott and Costello. Following World War I, Mo teamed with Brother Shemp in a blackface act. This is when they met up with comedian Ted Healy. Starting in 1923, the brothers went to work as Healy's Stooges. They crossed paths with Larry Fine in 1928, and the original Stooges were born. That is right. Shemp was an original Stooge, who clearly came after Shemp had left the group. The frizzle-haired Fine was a showbiz veteran at a young age. He had worked with a vaudeville musical act, the Haney Sisters, and Fine. After a long apprenticeship on the circuit, Larry was a happy-go-lucky type. A bit of a flake and not especially committed to hard work. He lived for the racetrack, according to Sitka. The team of Ted Healy and his Stooges did well at vaudeville and appeared in several Broadway reviews. Now, you wouldn't think a game like this would devote much of the manual to storyline elements, but it actually devotes 2 pages to the story. Just goes a little deeper into that introduction scene that we saw at the beginning. Somebody's crying. It's coming from the orphanage, chirps Curly. What kind of crumb would make an orphan cry, wonders Mo, as the threesome gather up their indignation and march. Inside, the Stooges can trace the sounds of sobbing to its source. Ma, the sweet little old lady who runs the town orphanage, Gee, Mo, whispers Curly, that's the oldest orphan I've ever seen. No wonder she's crying. That's Ma, you pea-brain, responds Mo, who helps bring the point home with a slap to Curly's head. The sound of the slap is so loud, however, it interrupts Ma's crying jag, and she lifts up her eyes to find the Stooges standing there. Why, hello, boys. It's good to see you. What is it, Ma? What's wrong? It's Mr. Fleecem. It's his company, the Skin and Flint Finance Corporation. They hold the mortgage on this orphanage, and unless I pay him everything I owe him within 30 days, he says he'll tear it down. Don't worry, Ma. We'll get the money for you. You will? How wonderful. Mary, Leona, Cynthia, did you hear that? Boys going to save our orphanage. Suddenly, one of Leona and Cynthia, Ma's beautiful daughters, appear and rush to the side of Mo, Larry, and Curly. Oh, we'd be ever so grateful, they trim. We'd be free to marry if the orphanage were safe and the repairs on it were made. And there was some money left over. Now, the game is made up of several mini-games, obviously, and here from the manual. The Stooges move through Stoogeville as if there was a three-dimensional game board. For each turn, 6 icons appear above the Stooges' heads, representing the next 6 squares on the street. A hand cycles across 6 icons at high speed. The player must hit the action button to stop the hand, and the Stooges advance through the streets of Stoogeville to the corresponding location. Here we are at the cracker eating contest. This arcade game asks the musical question, waiter, what's this oyster doing in my stew? Curly sits down to a bowl of oyster stew and must manipulate his spoon to get the crackers floating on top. This sequence comes from the 1941 short, Doubtful but Dumb, and represents a classic bit of screen comedy, with Curly doing his best to fish the crackers from one very protective oyster. This captures that scene perfectly, by the way. Here we have the board from the manual. This is the first 30 spaces or so, I believe. It's very cool to see the board, and it really helps you. I wasn't really thinking of the game in terms of a board game until I actually, I read about it. But then I'm like, I couldn't really picture it until I saw, this. And this is exactly how the spaces are done. All the spaces in the game are predetermined. So I think there's some strategy there if you, could memorize what was ahead. As you get better. I never quite got to that point, other than maybe like the first, few days or something. But that is the very cool looking game board from the manual and the Amiga reference card here. How to play. Mo has a map of Stoogeville, but can't make up his mind where to go next. Press the fire button, stop the hand, and go to that place, or wait until the timer runs out, and go wherever Mo's hand stops. You will have about 2 seconds to look at the map before the hand starts moving, and the timer starts counting down, so pay attention. There are 180 places to go in Stoogeville, all on a one-way street. The first 30 squares are on the back of this card. The street never changes, so after you play several times, you'll really know your way around town. Thanks again to Intricate for that wonderful manual and reference card there. Now, I don't have any personal memories of this game as a kid because I didn't have this one. This is Stygian did have it, and I forgot to ask her about her memories. Maybe she'll stick some of them down in the comments below. But I do have a memory of this game though. Now, I was a fan of Lethal Weapon, the Lethal Weapon movies as a kid. Probably not kids' movies, but I watched plenty of non-kids' movies as a kid. Now, in Lethal Weapon 3, Riggs, played by Mel Gibson, meets a love interest played by Rene Russo. Lorna, I believe, is her name in it. And, Riggs has always been a fan of the Three Stooges. I believe that is, at least from the second movie. I believe it's in the first movie as well. There are little things, every once in a while he does some kind of little bit. He's a fan of the Three Stooges. Now, in this third one, we find out that this woman is also a fan of the Three Stooges, and you will see this very game. I don't know if it's the Amiga version or maybe it's the app. It's definitely one of the better versions, so it's either the original Amiga version or more likely, knowing Hollywood, it was probably the Apple II GS version. I'm thinking, as I couldn't place the actual computer itself in the movie. Just that it's the game. Anyway, Riggs is playing around in her apartment, hits the mouse to the computer. The screensaver goes off, and guess what pops up? This game right here. And he's like, oh, what is that? You know, what is this? Research? Yes, this is research, Riggs. So that's my single memory of this game from back in the day, but I have a new memory, though. It's playing this game, going through quite a bit of turmoil in order to get good enough to actually get the best ending from this game. But liking the game enough to, want to research it, to go in there, and then, I watched, the 4 or 5 films that the game is based around, but then it inspired me to watch a whole flood of them, and I'll never forget that. So there's a new memory with this game today. I was good enough at this game to go all the way to the right. I went all the way to the right without hitting anything. But then once it flips around and goes, it's harder. It actually is harder going back the left, just based on the overall placements of the items. And I never did. Perfect the boxing scene perfectly. I picked up a few reviews here for you guys to look at for some historical perspective. Nothing from Amiga World. Oh, I really don't like when Amiga World just thumbs their nose at a game and doesn't even review it. What a great magazine, but there's a lot of things that they just did not cover for whatever reason. But guess who also, the same company that made Amiga World also made Computer Gaming World. It's no wonder I like both magazines, huh? From August of 1988, Computer Gaming World, Three Stooges, available at the time for the Amiga and the Commodore 64. Number of players, solitaire, I like that. 39.95. Similar, Westlake Village, California, NTSC 43, aspect ratio. Get it right, guys. Reviewed here by David M. Wilson. Either I just put in the wrong disc, or somewhere I put in a Defender of the Crown disc in a box labeled The Three Stooges. There, on my monitor for the entire world to see, was the familiar Defender of the Crown title screen, and the computer was loudly playing the rousing Defender of the Crown theme. Then suddenly, Radio Static took over as the three familiar Stooges marched onto the screen. Imagine my shock when Larry said, "This looks like a kid's game." This gave way to the authentic Three Stooges music, and the real game began. Right then I knew that I was in for a slapstick treat with Cinemaware's latest release. They had captured the Three Stooges mystique. Cinemaware's Three Stooges game continues the company's fine tradition of innovative games with excellent graphics and sound. Cinemaware calls their products interactive movies rather than games, and this product, players will almost feel as if they are watching one of the trio's popular short subjects when they watch the credit sequences. Another arcade segment can be important to the game. It is the slap fight. The segment will not directly provide the Stooges with any money, but it helps to slow down the hand which selects the game's segments. The player becomes Moe and must win the sadistic battle of nitwits with Larry and Curly. The players who want to increase their chances of hitting will have to retort to faking by moving Moe's hand repeatedly before striking. The more hits Moe gives Larry and Curly, the slower the hand used in the selection will move. Hint, Curly seems to be the biggest sucker in the slap fight. Stoogephiles who tire of the arcade elements of the game will enjoy the trivia contest. In this event, players answer multiple choice questions about the boy's career. Before playing the game, players should read the documentation which details a lot of the history of the Three Stooges. Anyone who does not read the book cannot expect to do well in the trivia contest. The Commodore 64 128 version has 3 questions at $200 each, but the Amiga offers a larger prize and more animated sound in these sequences. Okay, the Three Stooges game is not for everybody, especially if you are the kind of person who doesn't want to ever see another Three Stooges film again. For those of us who remember the boys from our childhood with a great deal of fondness, however, the game is simultaneously a delight and a piece of living memorabilia. In fact, this game gave me the courage to watch a few episodes. If you are or were a fan, you will enjoy this game for its fresh approach to some old friends. It really gets to me when I review a game myself, and I'm collecting my own thoughts about it, and then I look historically at what these people were saying back in the day, and their thoughts coincide with my own. This game inspired this reviewer to watch a few himself, just like it did me. That's all you can hope. That's all you. It speaks wonders about the game. Now, besides the main mini games that are in the game, we have these sequences. Here are these random spaces that we can land on. Now, we land on, I guess, the banker, I guess. He might just taunt us like he did there, but he might want some money for taxes. And I like, you'll never make it. You have 0 days left. It's just, that's funny that I happened to land on it like that. And this is the end of the game. This is the second best ending, I believe. And Ma here is going to thank us for our gift of $13,315. We saved the children's home, and we have fixed it up. But we do not get the best ending. The best ending is when we get to marry them. So, but the fanfare will start up there, and the game will end. Here is a bit of that hand. I've kept the hand in control prior to this. Try to get the best score. So, you know, you do those little slap contests. It slows the hands down. Eventually it gets to a crazy point where it's just super, super fast. You hit the trap 3 times in one day and the game's over. And I believe there's like, you get all his fingers, most fingers. That's 5, I guess. So you have 5 lives. Overall, if you get hit in the finger 5 times, the game will end. And 4,000 is not enough. The banker has the orphanage. This is the bad ending. And he's just going to laugh, taunt at us, while everybody looks along quite worried. No fanfare, and that's the end of the game. Now here is the first good ending, where we have enough money to save the orphanage from foreclosure, but not enough to fix it. It's a shame we can't fix it up, but the fanfare does play, so it's a good ending there. Now I'm going to give you a compilation of trivia questions that I put together for you guys, for the big Stooges fans. See if you know the answers to these. And while we look at that, we're going to take a look at Compute's Gazette from December of 1988. 88's best games. The pros pick the cream of the crop. Now, it took these guys quite a long time to get into the Amiga scene. Now, there is, you know, even in this magazine, there are definitely advertisements for the Amiga. They talk about the Amiga a tiny little bit, but for the most part, this magazine was about the Commodore 64 for the longest time. But so, keep in mind, they are talking about the Commodore 64 version here, but with all the great Commodore 64 games released in 1988, choosing the best was not easy. After due consideration, here are our picks for the best games of the year. If you've missed any of these, be sure to check them out. You'll be glad you did. Here's the Three Stooges as one of 1988's best games of the year. Not many attempts to transfer characters from Cinema Software have succeeded. This one does. Cinemaware has taken the time and effort to make this game look, sound, and feel like a Three Stooges film. Digitized music, sound effects, and voices from actual movies the trio made for Columbia help add to the slapstick realism. And in the same issue, they chose to name it as one of their best of 1988. They actually reviewed it in this one as well. I'd say that to know them is to love them, except for the fact that I know a lot of people who not only don't love the Stooges, but are actually offended by them. Go figure! As for myself, I love them. Maybe even more today than when I first made their acquaintances as a kid. There's something about Larry, Moe, and Curly that ages well, like fine wine or comfortable tweeds. Part of their modern-day appeal may simply be nostalgia, but the more likely reasons are the universality of slapstick, of which the boys were the absolute masters, and the basic sweetness that underlies even the most violent of Stooges' routines. Both of these aspects have been captured by Cinemaware, and it's a high time, too. Before now, the Three Stooges had made, at best, a shaky transition to the modern world. In the late 50s, their films moved from shorts to full-length features, but eventually was hollow at best. For one thing, Curly the Soul, the outfit, had died, and with the exception of Shamp's subsequent replacements were hardly fit to have their toes stomped by Curly's shoes, much less to fill them. I don't know, I kind of like them all. Enter Cinemaware, which achieves the transition that the movies and cartoons mangled. The Three Stooges is not only a terrific piece of action software, but it's also a genuine addition to the Stooges canon. Cinemaware has long identified its products as movies, layering cinematics, credits, and narrative over interactive arcade sequences. This approach has worked quite well, generating hits such as Defender of the Crown. Lately, Cinemaware has worked to stretch this format beyond arcade-level action. Plot and narrative are fighting more and more highly in the company's releases, with interior arcade games becoming increasingly integral, if not subordinate, to storytelling. But the company hasn't forgotten its roots either. Stooges is a good example. While the game depends on arcade sequences, they are great arcade sequences. Besides which, if ever there was a subject suited to arcade adaptation, it's the Three Stooges. Slapstick with the Stooges trademark, and Slapstick makes a fine foundation for an arcade-style computer game. That this package is a labor of love is obvious from the very funny title sequence throughout the program. Documentation explains the game mechanics, which are simple enough for a child to operate, yet challenging enough for an adult, while also paying tribute to the Stooges themselves. What would the Stooges themselves have thought of this project? First, being the fellows that they were, they'd have been happy to help save the orphanage. And being the boys that they were, they also would have slapped, gouged, and tugged each other for control of the joystick. In other words, they'd have loved it. And anyone who doesn't is a chowderhead, or at least a wise guy, eh? Yeah. After far too long an absence, the Three Stooges are back. Keith Farrell. And quickly take a look at a few European magazines to get their take on it. If you examine the individual parts of the Three Stooges, then there is little to get excited about. None of the arcade games would stand up on their own, but that is not the point. Similar titles are better described as entertainment rather than games pure and simple. Indeed, that is their whole underlying philosophy. Heavily reliant on its graphics, it comes to no surprise this version is by far the most impressive. The three characters really come to life with detailed, precise animation that perfectly catches the Stooges' individual idiosyncrasies. Sound mirrors the quality of the graphics, ranging from sample speech to atmospheric music. Unfortunately, the price for the high presentation is a lack of gameplay and continuous disc swapping. The Three Stooges has immediate appeal like a movie. There's much to see, but little to do. 78%. Out of all the games I played on the Amiga so far, I enjoyed the Stooges the best. The graphics are wicked. The Stooges in the street scenes are well defined, and it's easy to identify their facial expressions. The digitized sound is used to great effect on all the screens and really does capture the slapstick brand of their classic comedy. Most of the scenes are based around separate short Stooges films and are brilliantly executed. This is probably the only game on any computer that has intentionally set out to make people laugh and worked. So it is an 8 out of 10. And lastly, if you're a Stooges fan, you're going to love the game. At least you will the first time you play it. After that, the digitized speech gets boring, the disc swapping becomes tedious, and the sub-games become too easy. There's simply not enough in here to keep you playing for much longer than a week. Too easy. 10 to 1, that guy never got the best ending possible. Now, again, I probably did spend about a week in total on this game.
Click much longer.
Yes, it's a short game. So what? Again, what is the whole theme to Cinemaware? You're at the movies. It's an interactive movie. That's what they said. And how long is a movie, everybody? At most, it's an hour, 30 minutes, before you start getting the attention spans, before they start getting a little whacked out there. Maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours at the absolute most, and you are pushing it there. If a so-called interactive movie lasts you a week, well, I think you've actually done pretty well there for 1987 here. Would it make, some kind of a top 10 list or something? I don't think so, unless it's going to be the top 10 licensed games. Now, definitely for the Amiga, this is among the best licensed games ever made. Definitely. But the overall game isn't, going to stick with you forever. But it's what it sets out to do one thing, and it does it well. It's a labor of love. It's absolutely a labor of love. It is not a cash-in, tie-in kind of thing. They weren't just trying to make money. They were doing this for love, and it shows. It shows. Any real fan of the Stooges absolutely will like this game. There is no part of this game they won't like. They will enjoy coming to this game. They'll enjoy getting their butt kicked at first. And should they stick around, they will enjoy mastering it. Absolutely, they will enjoy mastering it. And I think people that haven't even really thought about it in some time will come to this game, like it enough, and want to go out and watch some films themselves. And there it is. The best ending rested on a trivia question that I just happened to luck into winning there. If I wouldn't have gotten that question, I would have had to go back and do it again. So I got the best ending, folks, and I was very, very happy when I got best ending. Wah, wah, here it comes, everybody. Thank you, boys. Thank you, boys. Your gifts of $20,460 has saved the children's home. And as good as new, here's the kicker. You have enough money left to marry my 3 beautiful girls. I just love how Curly here has all those hearts. All the other hearts for Mo and Larry, they're above the women. But for Curly, they're all above Curly, and there's a lot more of them. Got a real kick out of that. And then nice picture here to take you out with the fanfare. And that is the end of 3 Stooges. I've shown it all to you. Hope you enjoy. I really enjoyed my time with this game, and I love how it inspired me to take a look a little deeper after that, to continue to watch the films, to really dive in. And you know, it definitely made this one take a little longer to get out there, but I think it was worth it. You know, maybe you all aren't going to see all the time I put into it, but I did. And guess what, everybody? This is about me, not you. I could have just hit record and just talked over everything. It would have been easy, and it probably would have been funny, but it wouldn't have been as good as what I did here. And you get that from actually wanting to cover the material. And I wanted to cover the material because I looked into it all, and I watched those films. It's great. It's great when you don't care about money, and you don't, you just got to release these things every Tuesday and Friday. Guess who I'm talking about there? I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make stuff I'm proud of. Simple as that. Let's point you to a few others. Of course, we have to point you to the other Cinemaware title I have done, Defender of the Crown. Dedicated to Jim Sachs. Love that video. It's probably my most proud video, actually. Another Amiga licensed tie-in would be Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Check that one out. I'll point you to the Hyperstone Heist on the Sega Genesis. Not enough people watch that one. Please watch what I put out. I put love into everything. Oh, and I almost forgot TV Sports Football by Cinemaware. I did do another Cinemaware game. There you go. TV Sports Football. Hope you all enjoyed everything. Subscribe if you like everything. Goodbye, everybody. See you next time.